amount of refund is going to be in the future.
Have most employers been withholding at the lower rate since January?
Yes, we
And so,
reduced the withholding tables in January, and in fact we'll maintain those same withholding tables into the coming year. So we'll in effect stay with the same withholding tables.
But the news release that came out in January said that that was the final reduction in the income tax cuts that were approved in House Bill 66. So if they went into effect, if the final cut went into effect January 1st of 2009, how is it you can delay this?
That's a good question.
It's happened before.
And I can give you at least 3 examples. But basically what we're talking about here is rather than having the 2009 rate fall, as in current law, legislation would be introduced to freeze the rates, with the 9 income tax brackets, the 4 rates, at the same rates as 2008. And the question is, how can you do that? I think that's the question. How can you do that during the year, while the year is still progressing? And it's been done before. I'll give you a couple or 3 examples. In 2005, when the House Bill 66 was enacted, the budget bill that first created the annual tax reductions, that bill passed in June, I believe, end of June, and the income tax rates for that year were reduced back to January. Now that's an example where the rates were reduced back to January. I'll give you another example. In 1982, some of you may remember, I don't know how many of you were here back then, but James Rhodes was governor then. And in 1982, a budget bill passed that actually did increase the income tax. It was a temporary increase at the time. And it passed on June 25th, 1982, Senate Bill 530. And raised the income tax 25% for the full calendar year back to the previous January. And it was actually collected through a withholding increase of 50% for 6 months. More detail than you may want to know. But it was effective back to January. Another example that might help you a little bit is if you think about a totally different tax here. We've been talking about the income tax. But if you think about the way your property tax works, sometimes we have levies on the ballot, property levies in November. And if that levy passes in your local school district, that levy applies to your property all the way back to the previous January, and you pay that levy 2 months later when you receive your bill in the following January. So I guess, does that answer your question?
Well, I'm still, it does to a degree. So the taxes that have been reduced for the first 9 months of this year are going to be recouped how?
To the extent that folks may not have withheld enough, and of course most people over-withhold and still will be over-withholding, but to the extent that they haven't withheld enough, they'll settle up when they file their return next filing season.
So it will be collected. I mean,
yes.
Right.
For the entire year.
Sure. Entire year, right.
Is there an average withholding, over withholding when you're talking about the average person?
I don't know that. We can get it for you, I think, but I don't have it withholding.
Commissioner, how much money are we talking for an average family makes $50,000 a year? How much does that postponement add to the
Okay,
tax?
if you'll indulge me, I'll do a $60,000 example, if that's okay, because we thought that was fairly typical. And a family of 4 that earned $60,000 in 2008 paid $1,474 in Ohio income tax. Okay, in 2008, $1,474. If we freeze the income tax rates in 2009 at the same rates as were in 2008, that same family earning that same $60,000 would pay $1,467, which is a $7 reduction between 08 and 09.
And that's due to the increase in the personal exemption.
All right, if I actually got the 4.2% reduction, how much less would I have to pay?
If you actually got the 4.2% reduction, your tax in '09 for that family would have been $1,389, or $85 less than in
Sorry, 1,300?
1,389,
Okay.
which is $85 less than in '08, rather than $7 less to freeze the rates. That's probably a pretty good example to 60,000 family for.
No, you're talking about whether it's a tax increase or not. If I'm working in that family of four, and I've been paying a tax rate for the first 10 months of the year at the current rate, and now you're telling me that I need to pay a tax rate $85 higher than that, why should I not consider that a tax increase on it?
Well, because your tax obligation is for the year, and for that year, you will pay less.
The number, I guess, that we had heard before, I guess I'm hearing $651 million